Governor, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. I want to start with the debate. We're just days away. You've hit the polling mark, but you haven't reached the fundraising threshold yet. If you're not on that first debate stage, will you stay in the race?
Well, if I don't make the first one, we plan on making the second one, but let me just restart that. We're going to make that first debate. I have growing confidence in that. The response has been incredible, and we have until next Monday, and so we're going to make the donor threshold just like we did the threshold for the polling requirement. So asa2024.com is how everybody helps me get on that debate stage.
And how close are you to reaching that 40,000 donor threshold?
Well, we're closer than we've ever been before. And so we're still tabulating it. We're getting like 2,000 donors a day or more coming in. These are a large amount of new donors to our campaign. That's a lot of momentum. And so we've got 5 more days. We're going to be able to make that.
And how will you shift your campaign strategy if you don't make that first debate stage?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm preparing for that debate and planning on being there. But if you, for somehow, don't make that first debate, you've got to ask yourselves the question, you know, will I be on the second debate stage, and can you meet the thresholds required for that? And obviously that becomes more challenging if you don't have the exposure from the first debate. And so it's really important to be there. What's interesting is, you know, will Donald Trump be there on the first debate? Will he be there on the second debate? Probably no one will know that until the very end. But regardless, people are looking for that debate as an opportunity to contrast the candidates. First time here in Iowa, New Hampshire, all across the country, that's their first way to measure the candidates side by side. So it's important.
And what does your debate prep look like so far?
You know, every time I talk to a voter, it's a debate prep because they're asking you a different question, and I doubt that the moderators will ask me any question that you haven't heard from some voter out there. So that's part of it, but also it is trying to strategically determine you know, how you're going to best contrast yourself, how you're going to set forth in few words how you want to address the deficit that we have and move toward a balanced budget, how you're going to communicate securing the border and the importance of that with my experience and background as head of the DEA, how we're going to address the fentanyl crisis. So I think through how you can succinctly talk about my vision for America, but it's also addressing Americans feel more divided than ever before, and to stress the importance of having leaders that overcome that divide and try to bring us more together. And those are things that are important for me to communicate on the debate stage.
And shifting over to former President Trump, on his most recent indictment by a Georgia grand jury, you've said that he's morally responsible. Now we'll see if he's criminally responsible. But his past indictments don't seem to actually hurt him politically. Why do you think that is?
You know, first of all, there's a natural sense that the Justice Department, because of their previous errors and politicization, you know, have unfairly targeted Donald Trump. So that's a fundamental sense of many of the voters that are out there, that he has been somehow victimized. Now, I don't buy into that. He has brought these problems on himself. But that is one of the reasons that he doesn't go down in the polls, because they sense unfairness, and Americans like fairness in our system. But as you go over time, and the voters here affirm this, that is sort of a holding place until they determine where they want to go next. And so they're looking at all the alternatives to Donald Trump and figure out where they move. And right now, Donald Trump is in the default position. But they know that we can't win with him in 2024. That would be a real challenge for us. They don't want to lose, so that's why they're looking to other candidates like myself.
And other candidates who have criticized Trump have also been struggling with polling. What do you think that says about the GOP base today?
Well, I think what it says is that we've got a robust number of candidates, and that the voters have not yet determined which way they want to go. And so when you look at most of the alternatives to Donald Trump are polling in the single digits, then the voters just haven't decided where they want to move yet, which means it's wide open. And even though there's 5 months left before the Iowa caucuses, people in Iowa understand they're not going to be making decisions until late fall and early winter. And that's probably true for New Hampshire as well. And the rest of the country is really not focused on it. So while we're all trying to determine who's going to be the next alternative to Donald Trump or the rising star, the voters take it much more patiently than sometimes the media.
And you mentioned President Reagan a lot on the campaign trail. Do you think that Reagan-era conservatism sells in the GOP today?
Well, I think a lot of people, young people, don't necessarily identify or understand what a Reagan conservatism is. So you got to talk about it. But when you talk about the principles of a limited government, you talk about growing the private sector of the economy and opportunity to go up the economic ladder. That's Reagan conservatism, and that's what young people identify with today. They want opportunity, they want to be able to control their lives. And so you explain it perhaps in a little bit different way, but they identify that. Well, they don't want government telling them what to do day in and day out, and that's the conservatism that I understand.
68% of Republican voters think that the 2020 election was stolen. Is the Republican Party catering to those voters?
Well, if anyone says the 2020 election was not the accurate result to say Joe Biden is president, then one, they're wrong, and secondly, that's not the Republican Party that can win in the future. We cannot win in 2024 by talking about 2020 and being locked into that mindset. And I don't see that happening. They don't want to talk about that. Sure, there were problems that they see. We've corrected many of those problems in the electoral process, but it's about the future. They're concerned legitimately that Bidenomics is not working, and they want to see somebody that can lower interest rates, that can get a handle on inflation in our country, and that create more confidence in our economy. That's what I want to do, I can do, and that's what a Republican philosophy is.
We're going to get back to Bidenomics in a second, but first, some Republicans have warned that Trump benefits from a crowded presidential field. At what point do you think that other candidates should consider dropping out and throwing their support around an alternative?
Well, first of all, Donald Trump should drop out. And whenever you're looking at 4 indictments and the fact that not everybody can recite what each of those indictments entail, they know this is not good for our country, and that no one under that kind of pressure can lead our country, particularly with the mindset that he wants to get revenge as the next president. And so if anyone should drop out, it should be Donald Trump.
But at what point should other candidates who are not leading in the polls, what point should they consider dropping out?
Well, I mean, you've got to evaluate it day by day, and candidates will do that. Are you raising money? Can you compete? Can you cover the entire nation? Can you move up in the polls? And those are things that I measure every day, but you don't say we're going to take the final measurement of a campaign whenever you're in the second inning. And so let's wait till we get to the later innings and determine who can move forward and win. To me, that's shortchanging the voters if you start making those decisions too early.
Speaking of electability, one of the biggest criticisms that we see in our polling about President Joe Biden and former President Trump is age. You would be 74 on Inauguration Day. What do you say to voters who are clearly worried about electing candidates in their 70s?
Well, first of all, I would look at the ideas and the vision of America for the candidate. And to me, that transcends age. And whenever I talk to young people, I go to college campuses, I know what they want in their future. And that's what is the future that I talk about and we can bring as president. Secondly, you always want somebody who's vibrant and healthy. And so, put the test out there. I'm happy to compete in sports. I'm happy to showcase health. And these are things that are not in our control. I mean, I don't have an arrogant attitude about health. but I have been blessed, and I'm ready to lead this country.
The governor of Iowa here recently signed a 6-week abortion ban, which is currently stalled. Do you hope that the state Supreme Court upholds that 6-week ban?
Yes. When you're looking at Iowa and the Iowa legislature expressing the will of the people of Iowa, pass abortion restrictions, I support that because that's where we are right now, each state determining their own future in that. Now, that might not be the result that New Hampshire decides on, or Arkansas, or another state, but Iowa ought to determine their future on that issue and make the decisions that provides for their citizens and protects the unborn and life that they want to protect.
So would you sign a 6-week federal abortion ban?
Well, I don't think there's a consensus on that.
If there was, if one passed, would you sign it?
Well, you're asking a theoretical question. You know, what I have said is that we don't have a consensus nationally. It's going to be resolved at the state level. If there was a consensus nationally in which they had fair, reasonable restrictions on abortion with reasonable exceptions, then I would sign it. But let's see what that consensus entails. I certainly support the exceptions of the life of the mother and instances of rape and incest. So those exceptions need to be in there, but we don't have a consensus around what that should be yet.
About 73% of millennials are living paycheck to paycheck. That's a statistic CNBC reported from back in April. Why is that, and what can the next president do to help those people?
Well, one of the challenges is high interest rates. Whenever the interest rates go up, the millennials' credit card bill goes up, and they have less to live on. Whenever you look at their desire to buy a home, they can barely pay rent today, much less buy a home and invest in that. And home ownership is not something we should leave behind in America. Every generation should have that access. So I want to make sure we continue to support the First Home Buyers Initiative, where we can provide support for that first home buyer. And that helps them, but it's really the interest rates that are the biggest challenge that they face right now, and that comes back to a growing economy, making sure that they have more in their paycheck that they can take home.
All right, Governor Asa Hutchinson, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
It's always good to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.